All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. This is Salah from Agile Nova, and I'm really excited to have Shane with us today. Before I introduce him, I want to just go ahead and thank our host today, IC Agile, and I'm just going to take a brief minute to go over some of the roadmap that IC Agile provide. This session is actually offer a learning credit through IC Agile. And the learning code is here, and this session will be recorded, so you can get it from the recording. And I can also post that on the Agile Nova meetup page. So IC Agile is a consortium that has a roadmap that advanced Agile learning. And there is multiple tracks, as you can see. First, there is a Agile fundamental track, and there's different discipline for each of those tracks based on your background or your interest, whether it's coaching or project management, business analysis, leadership, enterprise coaching. And there's multiple levels. Once you attain a certain level, once you finish one track, you can get the professional certification, and then you move on to the next level, which is the expert level. At that point, you have to go through a different process. And then after that, you can reach to the master, which is the final level of this roadmap. So with that, you can go to icagile.com and view more information. But I want to go ahead and get started with the webinar. So Shane Hastie is actually based out in Auckland, New Zealand. He's supposed to actually. We were going to have him here in person, but plans have changed, and we decided to go with the webinar format so that we don't cancel it. Shane is the Chief Knowledge Engineer and Agile Lead Practice for Soft Ed, and he's been very involved in product ownership and business analysis. And one of the tracks of IC Agile, he has been one of the contributors to that track. Shane is a world traveler, and he's based in he's right now. It's actually Saturday where he is, so I'm really I am thankful that he was able to join us. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Shane and get started.
Good morning for me. Good afternoon. Welcome, folks. Salah, thank you for that kind introduction. Yes, been very engaged with the IC Agile business value management pathway, and product ownership firmly sits inside that pathway. So Salah's said most that there is to say about me. Yeah, I am a New Zealander. I'm actually based in Wellington, not Auckland, but that's okay. They're fairly close anyway, certainly in global distance. I'm currently on the board of the Agile Alliance, and I'm also an editor for InfoQ. And really the thing that I define myself by at the moment, though, is I've got 6 gorgeous grandchildren, and I get to spend a fair amount of time with them. So that's what most of those pictures are about. Their life is a lot more than just work. So I suppose to start with, I have a broad contention that I want to make. I feel that the product owner role, as it is defined, as it is identified in most of the branded Agile methods, is fundamentally either broken or impossible for a single individual to do. So that's the premise of this talk. And we'll look at the product owner role. We'll look at the impact of different project types on that. Then I want to look at what it means to be a product ownership team. So my premise here is that ownership is a team sport. Then we'll have a little discussion about value and a bit about innovation, because one of the most important characteristics of effective product ownership is actually solving the new problems, coming up with the new ideas. It's not redoing stuff we've done before. So innovation really does matter. On top of that, I've got a couple of points where I'm going to hope that people will engage and we can have some conversation. And if the group stays relatively small, we can actually do that conversation live over audio. Otherwise, we might I might ask you to put stuff into the chat window. Generally, if you've got something, a question or something that pops up, please feel free to put it into the chat window. I will do my best to address them all, possibly towards the end rather than in the flow, but we'll see how things go in terms of the flow of the interaction. So welcome, thank you. Here is what the Scrum Guide says the product owner role. The product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product and the work of the development team. How this is done may vary widely across organizations, Scrum teams, and individuals. No problem with the first part. That all makes logical and good sense. The thing that worries me is the final statement here. The product owner is the sole person responsible for managing the product backlog. This, in my mind, is for anything except a really straightforward, simple initiative. This is fundamentally impossible. I think that the nature of the projects and the work that organizations and teams are doing today is far, far too complex for any single individual to take that sole responsibility. So the title of this talk is Product Ownership is a Team Sport. Now, I use the term team sport very, very consciously. This is the metaphor that I want to convey. A team is a group of people who are working together actively towards the same outcome. Every team has a captain. And this is not about moving towards anarchy and decision-making by committee and all of those things. The product owner or value facilitator is a term that I've taken to using for this role, is the final arbiter of decisions, but there's too much going on in any reasonably decent sized initiative for a single individual to have everything in their head. In the same way, though, the team component, the team metaphor is incredibly important. They're people all working together with different skill sets, but they are overlapping. If I take a soccer team, somebody in the back of the grouping is able to score a goal as well as any one of the forwards. It doesn't happen as often because that role is more focused on one particular aspect of playing the game. But also people don't on a team, on a sporting team, they don't defer to the captain on every point. You don't ask the captain, may I kick the ball now? You go ahead, you kick the ball, but the captain is providing that overall guidance. So to me, that's what product ownership and product ownership as a team sport is about. What I'd like to do at this point, and we're a small enough group that people can just feel free if you want to unmute and let's try and have a chat. What are some of the challenges and issues that you have seen with product ownership out there in the wild? Or am I talking through a hole in my head? Please feel free to disagree as well.
So this is Rose Hyde. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Rose. Welcome.
Okay. So I've been in the government sector for the U.S. for a few years now, about 3 years. And so we do have a problem with having an individual as the product owner. So they definitely need help. They need business analysts to help them write stories, or they need a UI designer to help them make some of those mock-ups. So they also seem to not be solely, they have a hard time making them solely on one team, and so they spread them across teams, which also makes it a little difficult too. So it is a challenging role. There's so much dependent on it, and it's hard to get that role fulfilled properly as Scrum asks for it to be fulfilled.
Yeah. So, yeah, you've certainly identified a number of the anti-patterns that I've seen out there. The product owner spread so thin that they're across multiple teams, multiple initiatives. They haven't got the time, the mental focus to look at one in particular. The lack of skills in things like good analysis, because analysis is a particular skill set. Being able to break things apart into their constituent components, the understanding of user experience and experiential design. That's a specialist skill. That's something that other people, that a lot of these skills are too broad for a single individual. Any other thoughts, folks?
And again, feel free to type in the chat if you're not able to.
In the face-to-face session, I'd be making you stand up and we'll use Post-it notes at this point. The other a common anti-pattern, certainly that I have seen, is the person who's put in the role, but then not empowered to actually make decisions. I have to go and ask Mary whenever there's a decision to be made. Well, why isn't Mary on the team? A lack of understanding of the domain is dangerous. A lack of also understanding of the potentials of technology is dangerous. So the person in this role really has to have a very wide range of knowledge that, in my premise, is it's too much for a single individual. But we also face the complexity of different initiative types. There truly is there's no one size fits all, and in a little while we'll look at a model that discusses what are some of the things that we need to consider. But I was at a talk a few years back where Tom DeMarco was talking, and Tom was talking about why building software, and he was focusing on software, why building software today is so difficult. And he came to an interesting, or made a really interesting and quite enlightening statement. The reason it's so difficult is because all of the easy problems have actually been solved. When I consider my own career in the early 1980s, I started working in what we at that stage called data processing. It wasn't information technology even. And the things we were doing were really just the first step in the productivity revolution. We were taking a lot of the manual processes that organizations had for a long time and really understood, and we were just automating them. And it was a pretty straightforward requirements approach. We understood what needed to be done. The rules were very clear. Things were not changing much, and we could implement them, and they worked. Honestly, if we look at the productivity improvement that happened through 70s, 80s, into the early 90s, when we were solving the really easy problems, it made a huge difference to the way business was done. But then, for me, I feel it was in the early 90s, we got to the point where where most of the projects that we had previously been dealing with, they'd been done. We now had the insurance process, the claims process tackled, the charging for premiums, the banking systems. These things were now just becoming business as usual. And we started to look to the next level of productivity. And this is where we hit complexity. And that complexity has been increasing and changing at, in my mind, an almost logarithmic pace. The other things that have been happening in parallel is human knowledge has been expanding. So our understanding of the problem domains that we're working with, that has been increasing. If you consider today, if you faced an accounting problem, you wanted to implement a general ledger, you wouldn't build one, you'd go and buy it. That's a problem that's been solved. But the sorts of problems that we're dealing with today are much, much more complex. The different interfaces that we're dealing with, the span, I'm sitting in New Zealand, most of you, I believe, on the east coast of the USA, and some of you on the west coast. That immediately brings a layer of complexity. The technology is helping us. But building that technology, figuring out what are the real needs for a product of this nature, these are complex problems. We're also building on top of these legacy systems. So there's an ingrained level of technical debt, of software entropy, that the internal code bases are becoming more and more complex and difficult. Some organizations are tackling with we've got to re-engineer our whole business, the competitive marketplace and challenge. All of these things just make the domain in which we work today a lot more difficult and complex. Janita Andrea defined this term way back in 2008. She spoke about the Cinderella project, the ideal, perfect, agile, in inverted commas, project. The one for which the definition of the product owner, as defined in the Scrum Guide, absolutely fits wonderfully. But the characteristics of that project don't occur very often. This small 6-person or less co-located team with generic skill sets, deeply engaged customer, clear terms of reference, short duration, web-based user-centric systems, not talking to technology, subject matter expertise available to us, clarity of vision, and absolutely dedicated project members, team members. If you're in that environment, the product owner role as defined is beautiful. All of the characteristics that we talk about, that we get out of the simplest of Scrum teams, is wonderful. Now, if we could, I would say make every project one of these. But the reality is it doesn't happen that way, which is why she called it the Cinderella project. It's a fairy tale. But honestly, if you've got this fairy tale project, please don't try and even impose any process on this team. Lock them in a room and leave them alone. They will figure out the best way of solving the problem, and you can be guaranteed that the solution will work. And I've seen this the few times that I have been able to work in such a closed, small domain and such a small initiative. It was great. We really got all of the flow and the benefits. But more often than not, this is what your project feels like. You've probably got people in multiple time zones. You've got competing stakeholders. You haven't got a single customer. There might be multiple types of end user. Isn't that a horrible term? The only other business domain where we talk about users is drug addiction. But when you hear people talking about end users, there's almost a sneer in their voice as well. So I like to think of these people more as our clients, our customers, our raison d'être. And you've got this community who have a variety of different and often competing needs that we need to deal with. We're dealing with technologies, even as simple as the interface. I suspect that amongst us at the moment, there are at least a half a dozen different devices that we're accessing this on. One person I can see is in a car. Now, they're probably not using a laptop. So it's probably something like that. So just that the interaction complexity makes things an order of magnitude, 2 or 3 orders of magnitude more difficult than solving the problems we were doing in the 80s and 90s. Then we deal with enterprise architectures, because we are building products that fit inside large, complex organizational domains. We're also building products that change the way people work. And we have to understand the impact that we're making on, even down to the level of organizational structures. So there's all sorts of added complexity. And Philippe Christian, he published this model. He calls it the octopus model. And for me, it was a really great view of what are the different things that we have to consider when we're looking at the makeup of skills across our teams. What do we need in place? And what do we need to consider? So size. And I don't care what metric you use for size. We know the difference between something that is big and something that is small. The level of criticality. If you're going to build a product where if something goes wrong, we kill people, or maybe we kill many people at once. Missile guidance systems kill the wrong people. Air traffic control systems, vehicle management systems. We're talking today about the autonomous vehicles, the Internet of Things, all of this stuff. What's the organization's business model? Are we building software as part of our revenue generation? Do we sell software products as our primary product? Or is software what we use to enable the business? A lot of banks don't consider themselves to be in the software business, but that's really what they are. They're software-driven organizations. How stable is the architecture? Are we working in an experimental learning environment, or is this something we're building on a platform that's been there for the last 10 years? How distributed is our team? Is it that small co-located group? Or are we spread across the one team that I work on? We're typically spread across 8 time zones at once. Now that's the other part of team distribution. Is the team dedicated, or are they part-time? We know the dangers of time slicing people. We've seen that. There's very solid studies that talk about it, but organizations still do it. What's our governance model? Are we a financial institution bound by rules like Sarbanes-Oxley? Are we in the medical space and doing FDA approval? Or is this the startup selling a new game on an app store? Totally different approaches there. What's the rate of change? What's the rate of change in the product, in the industry, in the business domain? One study I saw, and it was local to my region, Australia and New Zealand, said that the average period of stability of a business process today is about 90 days. The average duration of an IT project was 9 months. So if we got the requirements perfect, delivered exactly what was asked for, it took us 9 months, the fundamental underlying process has changed 3 times. Oops. The age of the system. Is there 30 years of technical debt? Are there defects? Are there bugs in there that have been hiding behind other blocks of code that might be exposed now? I saw that one in 1982 when I started work. And I think we still do it today. You take the most junior people and you put them onto the maintenance team to look after the core production systems of your organization. And in 1982, my first task was to look for a bug in a software system that was over 1 million lines of code. We paired up. Pair programming isn't new by any means. And we used the techniques that I would recognize as being agile today. And we found the bug eventually. And it turned out that a change had been made in the system about 3 months previously that had exposed a block of code that hadn't ever been used before. And that block of code was date stamped 1964. So there was a bug in there that had been lying around waiting for 18 years just to greet me in my working career in IT or in data processing. So these are the 8 factors, hence the octopus that Philippe Christian talks about in his examination. And he goes a lot deeper and presents ideas about different practices and how applicable they may or may not be based around the characteristics of the initiative. So I would encourage you to have a look at that. It's a really powerful discussion tool. So what are some of the things that I think product ownership entails? There's product management. There is the life cycle management of this thing that we build as a product in and of itself. There's at least some consideration of marketing. Now, in some organizations, this is marketing to the end consumers. In others, it's marketing to our stakeholder community. There's advocacy for the business needs, for the customer needs, for the end user needs, and they may all be quite contradictory. There's a level of domain subject knowledge that is necessary. There's analysis skills. There's user experience and graphic design skills. There's also the need to be innovative, to come up with new ideas, to understand the potentials of technology, to take different ideas and mash them together and produce new things. They need to be good communicators. They need to be empowered decision makers. And they need to understand the implications of whatever the legal and compliance framework is that they work in. So to me, that is way, way too complicated, too difficult for a single individual. I see this as needing a team. And in a conversation with Ahmed Sidki, he gave me this picture. And it was great because it really helped both of us, I think, gel our ideas. So we look at the role there of the value facilitator. This is really important, and I don't care what the title is. We're value manager, product owner, product champion, steward. This is somebody who is the team captain. But then within and around this person, we need other skill sets. Project management, if we're in an organization that has a large project structure, if this stream of work is one part of a multi-layered program, then you need project management skills. If you are the Cinderella project, no, you probably don't. The project management skills are instilled within the team. We need to understand that governance, and that might, again, depending on the nature of your organization, that might be a very, very light conversation, or it could be a really, really heavy, full set of things we have to do to prove that become part of our definition of done, that we are not going to kill people when we release this product. We need business analysis. We need subject matter expertise. We need that user experience and graphics. We may need independent verification. We certainly need that user customer testing perspective. And please note that we have a very important overlap role as well, which is to the delivery team. Now, does every one of these hats have to be on a different body? Absolutely not. These are roles and skill sets that people need to wear and need to have. I do feel that it's generally way too much for a single individual, because all of these things have to come together. But take that metaphor of the sports team with the team captain. That value facilitator is my team captain. And they've got everything they need to identify, prioritize, and make decisions about, so that for the delivery team, we're giving a clear, consistent, and useful message. And the complementer to this is the delivery team. Now, it is quite reasonable that these two teams may well be very strongly co-located and have a large overlap. But also, it is reasonable in certain contexts that these teams have a very thin overlap. The minimum overlap is in terms of that facilitation and those analysis skill and knowledge. But the delivery team needs the team facilitator. Again, role titles, Scrum calls it the Scrum Master, the Kanban Master, Iteration Manager, the steward of the delivery team, focusing on the health and well-being of the development process itself. We need analysis, we need testing, we need development, we need architecture, and we need the other generalizing specialists that we talk about to give us all of the skills needed to deliver working product increments on a regular basis. I personally am very strongly biased towards using an iterative agile process, but Kanban with continuous flow works well in many contexts. But I like personally the iteration structure that a framework like Scrum gives us. Scrum, XP, adaptive software development. There are many brands, but that idea of the cadence is very, very important to me. So, two teams, a lot of overlap, a lot of interaction, a lot of collaboration, all working in the same direction. So if I can possibly throw it out, we do have a little bit of time for some conversation. Does it make sense? Or am I talking through a hole in my head? Do you see this as a useful construct in your environment? Nobody. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'll go again. This is Rose. I think it's a useful construct, definitely. I see the value because I agree with you that is an awful lot for a product owner to do. So it really does seem to help when there are additional skill sets that can work with them on that team.
Thanks, Rose. And it sounds like you've actually implemented teams or got teams doing this, or is it just happened by osmosis?
think she's on mute.
No, that's okay. All righty. Thank you, folks. Now, I'd like to tackle some of the things that happen inside the initiative. One of the things that worries me when I look at a lot of Agile initiatives and Agile teams and the work that they're doing is the way they structure their backlog, their list of things that we need to get done. And once we get, again, above the Cinderella project, I've seen backlogs that are 2,000 items long. A backlog of 2,000 items is a horrifying queue. Nobody can keep that in their minds. They can't manage that effectively. And it becomes actually mental overload for everybody on the team. We look at the backlog and you actually get feelings of despondency. Whereas in my mind, the shape of the backlog should be like what we've got on the right here. At the back, at the top. Now, this funnel shape is quite deliberate. I've done a lot of work over the years in mining organizations, and one of the things that I've seen in action are the big ore crushers. Things that, this was in South Africa, looking at diamond mines. You take these big chunks of rock that have been blasted out of the ground, you put them in the top, and they grind them down and grind them down. And what comes out at the bottom is the gems, the things of value, and we throw away a lot of the stuff around the outside. And this is something we need to be able to do on our Agile projects as well. That backlog of 2,000 items is scary. It overwhelms us in terms of thought, and even 150. It overwhelms people when you try and understand the complexity in a backlog like that. But what you do want is ideas of where we're going. This is something to quote my friend James, we don't just sit down and write code like free-form poetry. We have to set ourselves up to be successful. And further away, you want these big, chunky, whether we call them epics, features, capabilities, chunks of requirements, chunks that define business need. As they get closer to us, to the time where we're ready to implement them, we want to grind them down. And part of the grinding down is actually throwing away a lot of the stuff that, okay, this is what we thought, but actually this is what we really need. Because if we look at studies that look at software products, somewhere in the region of 60 to 70% of the features that we build into products are never used by our customers. This, in lean terms, is a tremendous amount of waste, and we simply shouldn't be doing it. So what we need to do is find ways to get rid of that stuff. And this is the constant backlog refinement activity, which is a really, really important part of that product ownership responsibility. And if we look at timelines, what we need now, the stuff that's coming out the bottom, these are the gems. These are the ones that we've identified. They are truly valuable. Somebody's going to want this. If we put it in, they will use it. They will get value from it. Then the further away we get, there's more fuzziness. We haven't found the gem in there, but we know that there's a piece of value somewhere. Well, we're going to grind that and we're going to throw a lot of stuff away. And then when we get out to the wishful thinking, that's just what it is. Wow. But somewhere in that big chunk of wishful thinking is that small gem. But trying to distill it now is pointless. Wait until it comes closer and closer and closer. Now, what the timelines are here, I don't know. This is based around your individual initiative. But you want to think about this constant funnel shape and pushing stuff through, because that gives us an opportunity to actively manage and to take a value-based focus. when we look at the work that we do. So this graph talks about the differentiator between value and effort. Story points is a measure of effort, the rate at which we're doing work. How much stuff do we get done? And I'm using an iteration structure here. You could be using Kanban flow, either one. Doesn't make a difference really in terms of the outcomes. But story points, most teams get to a point where they have a relatively stable velocity. We're steadily delivering around about the same amount of work in every working cycle, whether that's a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever your iteration, your sprint length is. What very few teams do is truly measure the value of those stories, where our prioritization process is a bit of a value discussion, but I don't believe it goes deep enough in most organizations. And the blue line on this graph is what I see almost inevitably as the shape of the value curve. The first few iterations, we're building stuff. It is valuable, but really it's not shifting the dial from a customer perspective, and it can't. We have to get to the minimum viable product. But the first few iterations a lot of the value is to do with removing uncertainty, reducing risk, but not truly building stuff that is going to go into the customer hands. These, we might have the walking skeleton of the architecture. We will have proven some things, and that's really, really important. But we come to an inflection point, which in this example I've said is about iteration 4. That is just an example. When that inflection point happens will be different on each project. But this is typically when we have the first truly minimum viable product, and we can get it into the hands of real users, and we start to see good feedback. Now we're able to refocus our priorities, and the bits that we build are the high value bits. And we have this period when the curve ramps up, and it does. You have, through the middle of most initiatives, you are delivering this highest value chunk. But what then begins to happen is we flatten out. We come to the top of the S-curve. We've got all of the things that are really, truly valuable to our customers delivered. And if all I'm measuring is story points, is velocity, and I've got a backlog, well, I'm going to carry on. I'm going to go all the way through to iteration 11 because that's what my budget was. That's the plan I've published to the world. And I'm sorry, folks, in the most agile of organizations, we still publish a plan to the world and we stick to that plan. Because we don't give careful thought to what can we do, when should we stop. So if we're able to explicitly expose value, and that's another conversation, another talk at some point, is how do we identify the elements of value? We can see when that curve is starting to flatten. When the curve is flattening, it's time to make the hard decisions about, actually, should we do this, or could we actually stop this initiative now? Save the next 4 iterations, move this team on to doing something that is more valuable for the organization, onto another initiative. But taking a value-focused perspective is actually pretty difficult to do for most organizations. You've got to have the courage to stop work. And in many organizations, especially the larger, more bureaucratic ones, we've got a budget. We have to use the budget, because if we don't use the budget, we might not get it next year. That's horrifying. So we will waste people's money because we're afraid of some uncertain future. I'm going to skim over this discussion because we are running close to my timeline. But I would like you to carefully think about that shape of the curve. What is the value curve in your piece of work and in your initiative? Now, I want to touch on the topic of innovation. And this quote, it's been around since 2007. Jim Highsmith is one of the people in the industry whom I respect tremendously. He's made a phenomenal contribution to the thinking in our industry. He says the number one challenge of Agile project management is creating a culture of innovation. Everything else pales in comparison. Agile projects often attempt to implement the new, the untried, and the nearly impossible. This is not the problem domain in which controlling tasks to achieve a fixed plan will succeed. It is a problem domain that demands the innovative exploration of possibilities. If we're taking a value-focused approach, if we're changing the shape of our backlog, if we're thinking of product ownership as a team with multiple different viewpoints, good ideas clashing together and coming up with new things, then we are able to innovatively explore the possibilities and make a difference to our organizations. Because truly, just building the next few stories in our backlog doesn't shift the dial. What can we do that is going to make the difference, that's going to deal with the open up new possibilities, new business areas in commercial organizations that are going to do amazing things from social perspectives for the non-profit organizations and government departments? How can we open up that thinking? Because we deal in a profession where most of the people who work in it are professional problem solvers, and then we constrain them to a backlog that is narrow and unmanageable. Know the difference between babies and bathwater, please. There are lots and lots of things that we've done in our professions that actually still apply today. Just because we're using a new framework, just because we're doing Agile in one of its flavors. Rose mentioned business analysis. How many times have I heard the horrifying statement, we don't need business analysts, we're doing Agile? I'm sorry, you need good business analysis, irrespective of what your methodology and approach is. Do you need a 200-page requirements document? Probably not. But do you need to be able to visually model the process flow so you can understand where the bottlenecks are? Well, probably. That's one of the skills. Don't throw away all of the useful things that we have built up across our professions just because we're doing something new today. So to wrap things up, I think the product owner role is good. It's the team captain, but it's fundamentally flawed. Projects are complex and varied today, more complex than they've ever been in the past, and that complexity is increasing. Product ownership needs a team with diverse skills and viewpoints, and that diversity is hugely important. Put value first, change the way we think about our backlogs, and make innovation everyone's job. So that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Shane. So now we open up for questions. If you guys have any questions, you feel free to unmute yourself or type your question in the chat box. We can start some discussion.
Yes, this is Brian. Shane, great presentation. Really enjoyed that. I'm certainly curious on the follow-on presentation of how to measure the value. Something I've certainly struggled with. That's that really resonated. That yeah, I need some help there.
It is a tough one, and it's one I've been doing some research in. One of the things that I've been seeing works really, really well is a lot of the innovation game stuff. What Luke Homan's been doing, games like Buy a Feature, really, I've used it a couple of times with projects now, with stakeholders, and it does help us to articulate the value. And value becomes a proportion of the whole. And we allocate that proportion to the story. So it's akin to story points, but it's not the same. I'm also doing some research. There is some good work on value pricing that I want to bring in and weave some of this stuff together. So that next presentation is a work in progress. But once it's ready, I will certainly happily share it.
Thank you.
So here's a question that may be on the back of people's mind. I think, value teams are definitely great, especially for large programs or large projects. And it's much more realistic than just one person trying to answer all the questions. So what would be a good starting point to form or set up value teams? Does it have to start from the beginning of the project, or maybe if the project is already in flight and they have a product owner, can they still use some of the value teams construct?
I think so. I think you can start bringing in this collaborative group anytime at all. It's better, and we know this from all of the work on teams, that people start together as a team. But if you've got an initiative that's in flight, your product owner is struggling. They're probably getting some of this help formally or informally anyway. Maybe we just create a little bit of structure around that, and we create that team around that product owner. So I think it can be brought on as a concept, as a set of practices anytime in an initiative. And the sooner the better.
Yeah. More questions? Okay. All right. So I know you earlier touched upon some of the characteristics or disciplines for a value team facilitator or product owner playing the role of the value team facilitator. Can maybe elaborate on what would be like the top 3 skills that we need to kind of get that into the product owner role right now?
Facilitation. Mm-hmm. Able to bring people together and have good conversations. The constitutional fortitude to say no.
That's a tough
the
one.
Most important activity that a product owner, that value manager will do, is say no to things. And they've got to have that courageous ability in the face very often of undue pressure to be able to say, no, that doesn't shift the value dial. And then a way of looking at what value really is. On the Agile Alliance board, we have what we call our value dials. They are 4 things that define our goals as the organization. And now I'm going to embarrass myself because I don't remember them off the top of my head, but one of them is internationalization. It's advancing the breadth and depth of Agile. It's delivering value to the members of the Alliance. And it's about creating collaborative communities. And when we look at any piece of work that the Alliance is going to do, we are tasked with spending the money in order to achieve those things. So we have these, we list them up, And we then do a simple, here is an idea. A member of the alliance has come up with a program proposal. And as at the board level, when we're looking at should we fund these proposals, we have these value dials up there, and we literally ask ourselves, so it's a subjective thing. How far will this initiative move each one of those dials? We discuss and we pick, and then we can see the result, because we've never got as much money as we would like. So we can't fund everything, and we pick the ones that move the majority of the dials, or sometimes it's a case of one thing will move one dial almost entirely but won't touch another, but what it's going to do by moving that dial is so valuable to the community that we will fund it anyway. So it's having the clarity about what are the drivers of value, and then being able to facilitate those conversations.
Excellent. All right, so we have a couple more minutes if anybody has a burning questions to ask. I know it's late on the East Coast here in the US, and it's a Friday night. So if there's any question that will keep you up at night and during the weekends, feel free to ask now, or we can go ahead and wrap up.
My contact details are there, and Salah has a copy of the presentation to share with you.
Great. All right. So thank you very much, Shane. Again, I appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. And I also want to join the participants who joined on Friday night and IC Agile for hosting the webinar. And this will be recorded, and I'll post it on the meetup page for you to review at a later time. All right. So I will go ahead and end it, and enjoy the rest of your weekend or evening, afternoon, wherever you are.
Thanks, folks.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.